Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Greg, who goes by the Hydrogen Man on social media. And today I want to dive into the world of hydrogen, an often talked about but very misunderstood topic. I want to dive into exactly what hydrogen is, the benefits, and also like a lot of the risks and scams and misconceptions because it's rife with all of that. But first of all, Greg, your story, when I was doing a bit of research on you, your transformation was like remarkable. Like I was really surprised reading some of the health conditions you had and overcame. Just like a couple, I'll just list like, severe depression, wanting to take your life like a few times at an early age. Like I was shocked to hear that. And just like the inflammation, you couldn't even change the channel, couldn't really walk. Like to me, looking at you now, like you're glowing, you're vibrant. I was really surprised. So I'd rather let you just do a brief introduction before we dive in. Where where were you at health wise, and yeah, how did you overcome these conditions?
As far as health wise, I actually had a long list of problems. And it was a little ironic that I worked in the medical field for just a little over 2 decades. And then I ended up getting sick. And I knew so well how the industry worked, working with numerous doctors, numerous specialists. I knew the field quite well. And it was scary once I got sick because, in my personal opinion, I should say, I don't give any medical advice, no medical claims. And everything today I'm saying is just my opinions. And I'm not making claims for or against any product or products. All right, that's my disclaimer.
Same here.
Um, and so ultimately, what ended up happening was, in the medical establishment, I hate to say this, but I don't feel like they fix a lot of problems. I've seen that, I've witnessed it. A lot of it is just pills for pain, pills for inflammation, pills if you're sad or depressed, and I don't really feel like they actually solved the problem or the underlying issue. And what happened with me is I had a lot of problems. Yes, I had like tumors in my body, by the way. I also had a really severe heart condition I was told was going to end my life and that I needed most likely open heart surgery. I had like autoimmune issues causing a lot of this crazy inflammation to the point where I couldn't walk and I was in just extreme pain. When I say extreme, I'm talking like level 10, doesn't really get any higher, and it was messing with my head. And at some point, it was probably going to induce a heart attack because the human body can only take so much pain. And even pain pills didn't make a dent. Like I literally had the morphines, the opioids, and they didn't make my pain go away. And so it was a very rough road. Not to mention that my liver and my kidneys were not working at their best. My immune system was garbage. I mean, it was just one thing after another, and it was really a big cascade downward. And of course, I went Western medicine. Nothing was working. Nothing was helping. And I was just bleeding out money basically because then all of a sudden obviously I couldn't work because the conditions were just getting worse. And so at that point I had a decision to make, and I am pretty good. I don't talk about it a lot, but when something's in my heart and something matters to me like so much, meaning like it's the number one thing in my life, I'm pretty good at figuring things out. I don't I don't necessarily like to spend massive amounts of time trying to figure out solving every problem in the world, but I can if I really need to. I'm pretty good at it. And so I took a huge deep dive into the health thing, and it was really frustrating because you can watch a million podcasts and you're literally going to get a million difference of opinions. You're going to have one guy to tell you eat this way or eat that way or this supplement or this water, and it was so frustrating trying to find the answers. I was willing to go down any path I had to go down to fix myself, but I was also trying all these different modalities, and they weren't working. That's really what it came down to. It just wasn't working. And I remember the example that you mentioned. I was just sitting on the couch because I couldn't do anything. I couldn't walk, and I went to go grab that remote control, and then I couldn't even work that because that's how much pain I was in. I couldn't move the buttons. And that's when I just had like a major breaking point. I had a lot of breaking points, but that one was a big one because I was quite athletic, and to go from that to not being able to change the channel on a remote for a TV is just heartbreaking. And I just started crying, and that's at our lowest point. Sometimes we make a prayer, and that's what I did. I was like, you know what? And I made a promise. I was just like, God, if you can guide me somehow and show me, like, help me decipher what stuff is real in the alternative health or what's not real and what's a scam, and so that I don't waste my money and waste my time, and I just need to get better. And I just really needed some help. And then I also wanted this burning desire in my heart to find the answers. I really needed that because, to be honest, I didn't like to sit down and read scientific papers, hundreds and hundreds of pages. It was so boring. And then even if you understood it, how do you get your hands on some of these things that could potentially transform your life? And so it became very frustrating. But the one thing that I am is I'm really big on data. So I don't go off of hearsay. I don't go off of what somebody thinks on a podcast, just like, oh, I think this is best. I need data. So I was looking at a lot of the latest scientific evidence on all sorts of stuff and really trying to understand the human body on a different level, but really have something to back it up. And that's when I stumbled upon hydrogen. And when I stumbled upon hydrogen and I read about it, I was kind of thinking that it was a scam. It sounded way too good to be true. And when something's typically way too good to be true, it's typically not true. But it kept popping up in my research and I kept reading about it. And I'm like, where is this stuff coming from? And it was coming from Japan. The Japanese, some of the best scientific research and data that I've ever found on health always ends up being from Japan. Not that I'm trying to do that on purpose. It just, when I'm very open-minded and non-biased, it just keeps going towards Japan. So then the big question began to be, so how do I get my hands on this hydrogen stuff? And like, what kind of hydrogen are we talking about? How do I get my hands on it? I can't just go to the grocery store. How much am I supposed to take? What's the proper protocol? Like, it was a whole learning thing and it took a lot of time. And then I started finding, anomalies within the hydrogen stuff that, in my personal opinion, I've been attacked about this a lot, but even potential dangers of hydrogen. And, there's a lot of stuff in that realm, which I got to be cautious about talking about because of a lot of, let's just say, industries or companies don't want me talking about it. And the Japanese had issues with that too, by the way. And they were able to clear that up because they're so much more on top of it than they are, honestly, like in America. And so, like, for example, like these bottles are really popular. There's like tons of them, like all these little stuff. I'll just tell you right now, I'm not a fan. I won't even use this if it was free. Like, I don't use these. These are just basically props. How you make hydrogen really, really matters. And it's the difference between if you do it the wrong way, and I did do it the wrong way many times, and I didn't get results. Things like the Kangen machines. I don't know if you ever heard of the Kangen machines. They were all supposed to be about alkaline water. Now they're preaching hydrogen water. It's like they're just trying to jump on a bandwagon and, stuff like that. And they do make a little hydrogen, but in my personal opinion, the way that they're making it really doesn't follow the science, actually. Hydrogen is actually pH neutral. And so they're making the water alkaline. And the long-term ramifications of that, which I read again in some scientific studies from Japan, short-term studies. This is an interesting thing about scientific studies. You always want to look at both short-term and long-term, because in the short term, like the Kangen studies looked good, and they couldn't figure out why. They eventually found out it was that the machines were making some hydrogen. It was never the alkaline water. And then in the long term, they started seeing some issues, and the issues they were seeing was due to stomach acids. Your stomach is designed to be acidic. The acids in your stomach are actually designed to, break down food and to kill pathogens and stuff like that. So making water, alkaline through ionization is typically not a very good thing, actually. And then on it goes. I just kept learning more and more. And then my learning shifted from, yes, okay, hydrogen's clearly good for you. But then I had to learn all sorts of engineering and science of metals and membranes and different ways of making the hydrogen and find out which is the best way. And so all this kept bringing me back to Japan. The Japanese literally have the number one technology as far as how to make hydrogen properly because they follow the science. And so there was a lot to learn and other things about your health too. Like, I'll give you one tip that's really simple for health, and it's free. When you first wake up in the morning, a lot of people will drink coffee or maybe eat something or maybe even have water. And that's something that, in my opinion, you don't want to do. This is part of one of my protocols. When I first wake up in the morning, I'll take a toothbrush, no toothpaste, just wet it, and you just brush your teeth really quickly and brush the inner surfaces of your mouth. So the inner lining of your cheeks, the roof, the tongue. Why? Because I read a study in Japan that found out that at nighttime we grow bacteria in our mouth, and a lot of it can actually be potentially cancer causing even. And when you wake up and you eat or drink something, you're ingesting this into your system. And maybe 1 day or 2 days of doing it is no big deal, but when you do this on a regular basis, it actually does appear to have a negative effect potentially. And so that's just one of my simple protocols. I always clean my mouth. And then, of course, I immediately go to the hydrogen water. And I even became a water expert. I had to learn all about water because there's so much disagreements about water online and what's the best water. And doing critical thinking, like just thinking on my own, what do I really want out of my water? Or what do I want in my water? And for me, doing quote unquote my critical thinking is I just wanted water that's clean. Like I just want water that doesn't have any contaminants. And I have a lab report right here. It's a third-party lab test. I know every water filtration modality in existence now. I mean, I've studied the subject thoroughly, and I've looked at lab reports, to make sure that I was right. Another thing I also do is I observe nature, because nature does a lot of interesting things, and then I line it up with a lot of the science, to find a way, to find the correct way, the way that I chose, the path that I was going to walk down. And I just instinctively knew that clean water is so important to your health. And if you just knew half the stuff that's in the water right now, it's insane. It's something that's a miracle to me that more people aren't getting sick. And I think there are a lot of sick people out there, though. And I could tell you all sorts of stuff. Look, there's literally pages. You probably can't even see it very well, but so many chemicals. And some of the stuff that was really shocking to me that I found in water was radioactive contaminants. I was like, what? I had no idea that we could filter these things out and that they were in our water, potentially, right? Another big one is bacteria, parasites, viruses in our water, even if you filter it. So a lot of people think that just because you're filtering, you're removing everything. There are different types of filtration. And if people want to know what I use, because people always are asking me, like, what do you use? I use a method called carbon distillation. Very similar to how nature does it, actually. Do you know, by the way, how nature cleans water? We should talk about this. It's pretty interesting.
Through the sun and evaporation and yeah, like the hydrogen
Yeah.
from the sun.
And it literally starts with hydrogen, right? Because the sun is made of hydrogen.
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, that's pretty much it. And I think that's such a beautiful thing about water is that just by heating it and the steam rising, the steam, which is ascending or uprising, as it rises up, it's literally leaving the impurities behind. I mean, this is amazing. There's no filter needed. The water does this naturally. And on top of it, when you do that method, it gets things out of the water that other methods just can't. And the big ones for me are also the parasites, the viruses, the bacterias. Those really, you deal with those by doing that method. Not to mention, by the way, I've also had a strong hunch for a long time that there's things in our water that we're not aware of. And about 2 to 3 weeks ago, they just announced a new contaminant that's in our water. And that's something new, not to mention all the stuff that we already know. There's so much stuff in water, and even pharmaceuticals. I've seen some lab tests about the 3 highest pharmaceuticals in our water. And I don't know if you know what they are, but they're women's contraception, which you don't be taking that, especially as a man. You don't want that woman hormone. 2 antidepressants. I think the number is pretty close to 1 in 2 women in America are on antidepressants or within a certain age group, which is crazy. And you don't want that either. There's some interesting data coming out. I'm not making a claim, but it appears that long-term usage of antidepressants might lead to Parkinson's. And I believe they're going to discover more neurological and brain-related issues in regards to such things. And there's research that shows that a 20, 30-minute walk works better than just about any antidepressant on the market. So just go for a walk, right? I mean, it's so much better for your health. And then the third pharmaceutical is antibiotics. So this lets us know that these are the 3 highest things that people are using because we pee those things out and they get in the water. And you don't want that in your water. So basically, that's what I did. I started cleaning my water to the highest degree. I cleaned my lifestyle as much as I could as far as pesticides, doing organic foods. And then the whole diet thing is really, really controversial. Everybody argues about what the best diet is. I chose my own methods. I don't necessarily need to go into them, but I did my own methods. And then, of course, the one thing that really changed it all, because I had done a lot of these changes. and my health just still wasn't really improving much. And it wasn't really until the hydrogen. The hydrogen is what really just transformed everything and really just changed everything for me. And then eventually I did blood work quite regularly, because another thing that I'm really big on is overcoming any nutritional deficiency. I've been preaching this for a while. Why? Because I read a scientific report that basically showed how there's deficiencies that lead to specific diseases. For example, if you're deficient in vitamin C, that leads to scurvy. How do you solve scurvy? Just get proper levels of vitamin C. No magic formula, no pharmaceutical. And so I thought, well, maybe part of my issues is that I'm having certain deficiencies. So I made sure to try to overcome all my nutritional deficiencies, which is very difficult. The average person, basically everybody seems to have deficiencies one way or another. It's extremely difficult to overcome. And the last time I had blood work, I literally, when you work in the medical field, you know that you don't want to get a phone call. When you do blood work or some test, the reason you don't want a phone call is because in Western medicine, we only call people when there's a problem. If there's no problem, we don't call. That's the rule of thumb. So I got a phone call from my last blood work from a doctor who specializes in blood work for over 3 decades. She knew her stuff. And it was really interesting because when she called me, I was scared. I was like, whoa, why are you calling me? What did you find? I was really worried. And she said, no, just relax. She said, everything's fine. And I'm like, then why are you calling? She said, I had to. She said, I saw your blood work and I've been doing this for over 3 decades. She goes, never in my life have I ever seen blood work that looked like yours. She said, I had to call you. She
Wow.
said, she said, I literally want to know what you're doing. She says, I have patients that I can't fix. I have my own daughter. She was telling me about her family. She goes, they have certain issues with their health, including certain deficiencies. And she said, I just can't fix them. And she said, and I saw your blood work and I'm like, what is this guy doing? This is crazy. And she started asking me questions. And then she started asking me things about my diet. And boy, when she asked me about my diet, I was like, I don't want to talk about that, because people get weird about it. It's weird how people get, if somebody wants to eat whatever they want to eat, I don't get mad about it. Eat Twinkies all day long but it's not my body. I'll treat my body a certain way, but she was shocked. When we started talking about diet, she said, that's impossible. She says, there's no way that you're eating like that and that your blood work looks like this. She said, it's not possible. And then she thought she's like, wait a second, how long have you been on that diet? I still remember when she asked me that. She goes, you've only been doing it for like 6 months or something. Maybe this is why. And I said, I've been doing it for over a decade. And she's like, wow. She couldn't believe it. And I think one of the things that I've discovered about hydrogen, if you do it properly, with the proper protocols, and really important to do it safely, because you're going to do it for the long term, just like water. You're going to drink water, not for a week, not for a day. You're probably going to drink water for the rest of your life. And so high quality is really important. And instead of these like little bottles, like I said, from China, I can tell you what some of the issues with those are, by the way, if you really want to get into that. But basically, doing these protocols, I realized I was making my body crazy efficient. I think my body is absorbing nutrients almost unlike anyone in the world, because she really just thought it's just not possible to be absorbing nutrients or have the nutrients that I'm showing on blood work by eating the way that I'm eating. It just doesn't make any sense. And I don't take any pills. I don't take a multivitamin pill. And the reason that I don't even do that is because, again, the science. We saw studies, I've read them, in regards to the difference between taking a multivitamin pill and trying to get the nutrients from food. And clearly the body responds better to food. And why? Well, just think about it. Our ancestors and their ancestors and our body's been getting nutrients from food and seems to recognize it better than some pill. And so what I did to get one of my tricks, I got a trick on how to get the nutrients. One of them is I use a powder from a company called Purium, because they're super pure. Everything I do now is about purity. And so, I guess if people want to know where to get it, if they want to use it too, but it's from a website called ishoppurium.com. I think it's Purium. And if they want a discount code, they can use the code uprising144K. That's a code that I have. But anyway, I use a product from them called Power Shake. And what I do is I put that product in a smoothie. because I always, that's my breakfast. I always make a smoothie. I put fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds and sometimes even beans. I'll put like a fermented bean from Japan called natto because it has almost the same amount of protein as beef. And it has so many other properties to it that are unbelievable, unlike anything else in the world. The Japanese have done so much research on natto. But definitely do your homework before you start taking it, because if you're on a statin, you want to watch out and stuff like that. So anyway, so I just started, creating all these different protocols. And then what really shocked me is when other people wanted to know about them, and I started sharing them with family members and friends and different people. And I started making my YouTube videos where I share everything for free. And then that's when things really started getting crazy, because I started seeing my protocols working for other people. And when I started seeing them do certain things that I just didn't think were possible, that's when I was just blown away. I mean, if I just name some stuff off the top of my head, like things that I've seen personally just kind of disappear with my protocols, I've seen just high blood pressure, cholesterol issues, diabetes, glaucoma, arthritis. I've seen all sorts of gut issues from celiac disease, Crohn's disease, IBS. I've seen other eye conditions like macular degeneration. I mean, that's supposed to be something that's incurable, by the way. It's not supposed to just go away. Torn retinas, I've worked with people like that. Probably some of the ones that really shocked me the most, there's a lot of them, but the one that really shocked me was when I worked with some people who had TBI, which is traumatic brain injury. They could barely speak. They would forget things 10, 20 seconds later. And I even worked with some people with Alzheimer's and dementia. And I still remember one of the emails that the daughter of one of these women who had Alzheimer's, she wrote me an email because she said, "Is this normal?" She started sending me emails about what was happening with her mother, even sending me pictures. I did a video on it. And when she started telling me what was going on, her mother didn't even recognize her own daughter when she started. And now she can, and she wasn't even really barely able to talk. And you can see the pictures, like what her face looked like. And then she just started, in time, she started smiling, recognizing her daughter, being able to talk again, recognizing her nurses. It was unbelievable because no doctor has achieved this. And I'm just some nobody, and I'm putting these pieces together, and they're not the most complicated thing in the world, but you do have to do it a certain way. So it's almost like a puzzle, and you do have to do it a certain way. And so I was shocked. And then more recently, there's actually a healing center. This guy heard about me. He was actually using a hydrogen machine, and it just wasn't working for his patients. It's called Axiom. And I mean, I'm just saying that's what he's using. I'm not making any claims, but the point is that he was using those. They had tried the pills, they had tried the little bottles. Clearly, they weren't working. And some of the lab reports, I have my concerns about those products, but I'll talk about that some other time. But basically, and that's after I saw lab reports. So this particular guy contacted me, and he's like, I hear all this hydrogen stuff, but I'm not seeing much results. Do you mind sharing some of your protocols? So I started sharing some information with him. Now his healing center, the stuff that they've been achieving is mind-blowing. It's so mind-blowing. Some of the latest testimonials, I even have some pictures. Crazy skin conditions that their doctors could not fix. They were going to a specialist. They could not fix these skin issues, and they were really nasty. Like, if you look at the pictures, they're disturbing. It's really sad what was happening to this person. And another one of his patients who had had a stroke. So they couldn't dress themselves. They couldn't stand up. They couldn't talk. These crazy conditions. And he ended up getting the equipment. He ended up getting different hydrogen equipment, which is the one that I personally use and recommend because they did it right, obviously, in my opinion, which is, if people want to see that one, there's a site called holyhydrogen.com. And that's the official company website. It is not a Chinese device. If you notice, almost every single device out there is Chinese. They're all made in China. I don't like the metals they're using. They use plated coated metals. They use membranes that I've seen lab reports on that concern me. I don't think China really cares about people's health. That's just probably my opinion. But basically, he got the Japanese machine, which is called the Lourdes Hydrofix Premium from Holy Hydrogen. And he started using that and all these different protocols. And the results were so incredible that the doctors of many of these patients, when they started seeing their patients transforming, they are now visiting his healing center. They're like, we need to figure out what this guy's doing. So that's been pretty fascinating too. So there's been a lot. There's been a lot of interesting things going on, and it's just been it's been wild. I never expected this in a million years. to be the hydrogen man. Or even like a health, people think I'm a health guru. I don't consider myself a health guru. But it's kind of shocking. And there's so many people out there talking about health, and I'm just a small little fish in a pond. But I've tried a lot of these other methods from these big time YouTubers, and listened to all these people and buying supplements and all this stuff, and none of it fixed me. That's why I ended up having to embark on my own journey. And it's frustrating when you're sick. Anybody who's been sick or gone down that road, it's a very, very difficult road and can just ruin your life. I hate to say it, but it did kind of ruin my life. I lost my job. I lost all my savings. It really affected my body in a very negative way. When you can't walk and you're bedridden, psychologically, it had a major, toll on me psychologically. It was just really hard. And my only hope is that something good comes out of it. And what I mean by that is I really want this information to help other people who are potentially suffering like this and want to get their life back. And that's the one thing that would have, I almost hesitate saying this, that would make it all worth it. But I still wish that I never had to have gone through it. But, there was a lot of good things that were learned.
Mm. Yeah, of course. Sometimes our greatest pain is our greatest teacher, and then it allows us to help others. And yeah, so how long did it take once you got on the pure hydrogen? How long did it take for you to kind of begin reversing those symptoms?
Well, so for me, it's different for every person.
Yeah.
And I've seen people have crazy improvements within weeks. I think for really major conditions, typically about 6 months is the number. For some conditions, like I remember my father's glaucoma took 3 years.
Hmm.
So 3 years of using hydrogen, even though a lot of other things were going away, I thought the glaucoma wasn't going to go away. He had had it for over 3 decades. And he would get his eyes checked every year to make sure he wouldn't go blind. And it was really shocking because the first year, he gets his eyes checked. He's like, hey, I still have glaucoma. Second year, same thing. And so I was under the impression, oh, maybe hydrogen doesn't work for glaucoma, even though it works for all these other things. And it wasn't until the third year that all of a sudden he's like, my glaucoma is gone. He went to the eye doctor. They didn't even believe their own results. They were like, this can't be real because you're so old and these things don't get better as you age, they get worse. And for it to just disappear and you're a very well documented patient, they were shocked. They thought the results were wrong. They said, we're going to repeat this test. So they hadn't come back and do the test all over again. And then same result. And they said, no, this can't be right. We're going to do it again in a couple of weeks. And after multiple tests, they just threw their hands up in the air and they said, this is not right. This is not possible. So they referred him to like one of the number one specialists in the US. And it took like half a year to get that appointment. And then that lady checked his eyes and she was blown away. She's like, I've never seen anything like it. And, and it's all some silly protocols that I that I created, and
Yeah.
and a lot of it's just intuition, reading scientific papers, and just using common sense. Like I said, clean water. I don't need it to be from some special spring. I don't need it to be, a specific pH or any of this stuff. It just needs to be clean. And then, of course, you have to add the hydrogen. The hydrogen is like that secret sauce that just transforms everything from being able to absorb nutrients better, to helping with free radicals, to bringing down inflammation, to help cell signaling, to be so amazing for gut flora. It does so many things that supplements just start seeming like literally a joke. They're just useless. You don't need to buy these supplements, in my opinion. And then a lot of them, I don't know if you've ever read the reports of people who've been harmed by a lot of these supplements. So I started reading about the different things that they have found in different supplements and how a lot of them even come from China. And I hate to say this, but like in the world of alternative health, I feel like it's kind of become similar to Western medicine. And in my opinion, most of the stuff is just garbage. I think it's just money grabs. And that's what I really feel like it's become. And it doesn't mean though that there's not some good products out there, but I think that it's a very small number. And that was one of the things that I embarked on that journey to try to find what were the good ones, and then recommend those, or not necessarily recommend, but share with my viewers what I personally use. So I don't recommend like 100 or 200 products. I only use like 4 different things. I just use my carbon distiller to clean my water. I use my hydrogen generator to put the hydrogen in the water, but also to inhale the gas. And then my purium powder, which is my nutrients. And then the one thing I do need always is I use my ionic vitamin D3 with K2 because vitamin D is just it's just that one thing that you have to get. And I like to do it in its ionic form. I've been doing that for a while. A study came out over a month ago. Now it wasn't that long ago that basically is proving that the way I was doing it was the right way because now they're finding there's certain minerals that interact with vitamin D, and that's why in its ionic form that's why I like it because of certain minerals with it. And I put it in a smoothie that has many different types of minerals. And so I just know that everything works synergistically, which is why you don't want to be deficient in anything because you don't have to understand the full matrix of the human body. And by the way, nobody does. I don't care what scientist you talk to, nobody understands exactly how the human body works. And that's why I just took it down to its most fundamental, simple level, which is let's just make sure it has everything it needs and let the body do what it should do. You know, properly hydrated, proper hydrogen, all the minerals, all the nutrients, and just do some simple things like sleeping right, doing a little exercise. Like you'd be shocked what the human body can do if given the right things. You don't need a million supplements, in my personal opinion.
Mm.
And the big reason I actually kind of got away from a lot of supplements was because I ended up with a cupboard full of them. And I'm looking at all these pills and I'm thinking, especially after looking at a lot of the ingredients and understanding and some lab reports of what's in this stuff, I'm like, all this stuff is eventually going to put a strain on my kidneys. And that's not going to bring on the healing because the healing, one of my parts of my protocol and my rationale is I don't want to burden the body. I want everything to be easy on the body so that it has enough energy to repair and do the things that it needs to do. So like one of my protocols, the average person doesn't know that eating a meal, there's a lot of interesting things about eating meals. One of them, it requires a massive amount of energy for the human body to digest a meal. A lot of people don't know this. And everybody's experienced it though, pretty much. I'll give you an example. Have you ever, like Thanksgiving or some day where you decide to just eat way too much food? Like everybody's eating too much. And what happens? You get really tired. And people try to say, oh, it's the turkey. No, no, no. If you eat a ton of food, I don't care what you eat, it could be cheeseburgers, you're going to get really tired because it puts a strain on your body. And so one of the parts of my protocol is I try to eat things that are actually really easy to digest, but that has very nutrient rich. So that's part of my protocol too. And then super absorption with the hydrogen. So just things like that. I even inhale the hydrogen while I'm eating. That's one of my other parts of my tricks and my protocols.
Mm. Yeah, so if anyone's curious, like what molecular hydrogen actually is, like how could you explain it to someone like simply if they're not like big into chemistry or anything like that?
Let's make it real simple, right? I love that. It's a gas. That's all it is. It's just a gas. Kind of like oxygen is a gas, molecular hydrogen is a gas. That's all it is. And there are numerous different types of gases, but hydrogen to me is the most special one. The things that I've learned about it. And, you know, then there's some really wacky realms as far as like, have you ever heard of, here I got a book about it too. You ever heard of this book?
Yeah.
Hidden Medicine Water? Yeah. And, you know, people don't understand the level of understanding that the Japanese have on water. And I mean, of course, who wrote the book? A Japanese guy. Who discovered this? A Japanese guy. And people don't know either that molecular hydrogen, the word hydrogen literally means that which becomes water. And so water, again, water to me is absolutely fundamental. And yes, I follow the science, but I also I follow or observe nature a great deal. And there's a place, there's more than one place, but one of the more famous places is called Lourdes, France. Have you heard of it?
Yeah.
And so Lourdes, France, you know, has a spring and people drink from it and their medical conditions are disappearing for whatever reason. They thought it was placebo for a long time, but they started doing a lot of scientific studies and seeing that people really were getting better. And they couldn't understand why. And what the beautiful thing is, I mean, nobody could figure it out. It was the Japanese, by the way, who figured it out because detecting molecular hydrogen gas in water is not easy. I mean, it's kind of tricky and it dissipates from the water so quickly. And so the Japanese figured it out, started doing studies, you know, on mice, and boy, those studies are unbelievable. I wish I had the footage for you. Like, literally, they would have like boxes, and they would have a wall, and they'd have all these mice on one side and other mice on the other side, and they would literally bombard them with like chemotherapy. And the mice, one group got hydrogen, and the other one didn't. And that's another thing about hydrogen that I've noticed is highly, highly protective is one thing I've noticed, which is why you want to make it right and you don't want impurities. It's really important to make it pure. And so one of the things that I noticed, like in this particular study, all the poor mice that got the chemo without the hydrogen, they were all not running around. They were in the corner. They were cold, and they were just all huddled up together, and they weren't having bowel movements that were very healthy or regular. The other side, all the mice were running around, having bowel movements. Their body temperatures were up. Again, a lot of people don't know. Here's another interesting tidbit. I'm full of interesting scientific info, but one of them was from Japan too, where they realized that almost every single cancer patient, they realized their core body temperature is lower than it should be. So they noticed the correlation between body temperature and health. And this went for even other medical conditions. And one of the things that the scientists noticed about hydrogen, and it was literally another healing center in Japan. It's more of a medical center that's working on patients with Alzheimer's, dementia, a lot of brain issues. And they basically discovered through thermo imaging, they used the best device. They don't use the bottles, they don't use the tablets, they don't use this stuff in these really these clinics that are really trying to make something happen. They use the number one device in Japan, which is actually in my opinion, the best machine in the world, which is the one that I use, and it's called the Lourdes Hydrofix Premium. We talked about it. They're specifically using that device, and they were doing thermo imaging, and they noticed that it obviously was affecting core body temperature in a very amazing way. Not to mention they've done live blood analysis in other laboratories in Japan, again using that device. That device is their kind of go-to device at this point. And I still remember a doctor, I posted that video on video, I think it was 68, and also video number 8. Those are some good videos. And anyway, I posted the video, and I remember a doctor contacting me, and she said, look, what you're showing there is impossible. She says, you're showing a scam. And I was like, no, I think it's legitimate stuff. She goes, no way. And so she wanted to find out how they did the study. And it's such a funny story because she went out and bought the device, the same device that they used, again, the one from Holy Hydrogen. And she took it to her own lab. She found the parameters and everything they did on that live blood analysis. And by the time she was done with the study, she was trying to prove me wrong. And she wanted me to tell everybody that I was wrong once she proved it. But she ended up coming back to me and she's like, I can't believe this, but you're telling the truth. The results came back identical to what you showed on your video. And she became a huge proponent of hydrogen. And so that was kind of a funny story too. And not to mention, I just have to say this. One of the it is the number one university in the world that researches and uses hydrogen. But they discovered some other interesting thing about it. They discovered that when you're doing it right, it appears to open up ghost vessels. And this is another interesting one because the blood is a huge part of healing, in my opinion. And ghost vessels, for people who don't know, you literally have like blood vessels that when you were young was getting blood supply. So blood was moving through there, bringing nutrients, stuff like that. As you age, there's literally no blood getting in there anymore. And it's kind of like a ghost town. There's no life coming in anymore. And that's why they call them ghost vessels. Well, somehow hydrogen begins to start getting the blood in there again and start bringing, nutrients to those tissues so they can rebuild. So that's another amazing thing that it does. There's so many things. I mean, it goes on and on and on. It's literally hard to believe a lot of this stuff.
Mm. So do those ghost vessels, do they help with like elasticity of like the skin and things like that? Is that why babies have like really soft skin and then you kind of lose that as you age?
Yes, that's one of the reasons. There's numerous things that are causing stuff like that, but another one is just simply hydration. So here's another example. This one was really interesting. This is my own mother, because she was really skeptical too, by the way. The story I got about my mother and father in hydrogen is really hilarious. But basically, I'll just say this one, and she's going to hate for me to share this story. Let's just say that she used to get this type of infection. I'm not going to say what kind of infection, but she would get this type of infection quite regularly. And she just hated it. And on top of getting this infection, she would also have this, she would get lightheaded and dizzy, almost felt like she was going to pass out. And no matter how much water she drank, she wasn't feeling hydrated enough. And this is very common with the elderly, because, the reason is because the elderly actually have less cells to carry water. And so it's really hard for them. It's almost like if you only have 10 buckets that you can fill with water, whereas when you were young, you had 100 buckets. So you got tons of water and you're hydrated. That's what you're talking about, a baby. They're really plump, very hydrated. And so my mother had this issue, and the only thing that she could find that would help her, at least with the dizziness and whatnot, was Gatorade. So she's like, I got to drink some type of electrolyte, substance, water, whatever. She says, because water just doesn't do it. And I was like, Mom, you probably don't want to be drinking that stuff. I've looked at the ingredients. I look at ingredients now. And I read all about them. And so I said, it's not a really good thing, Mom. She goes, well, it's the only thing that works. So she would do that. And then once I literally bought her a hydrogen machine and I bought her also a carbon distiller, I wanted her to have the cleanest water on the planet. And literally after that, I remember when I went to her house, I noticed there was no more Gatorade. She always had these cases of Gatorade, in the corner, and they just weren't there anymore. And I started talking to her about it, and she's like, ever since that hydrogen stuff, she goes, I don't get dizzy anymore. And I feel super hydrated. I feel great. Everything's fine. Even her thyroid numbers, because she had a thyroid issue since she was really young, and her thyroid numbers were getting better. And her doctors are even like, what's going on here? Like, we're having to lower your thyroid. Is all of a sudden everything's working properly all of a sudden? Because we're talking like, I don't know, 40 or 50 years of taking some thyroid medicine. So that was shocking, right? That her thyroid appeared to start doing better. And what else happened to her? Oh, her infection stopped. So that's another thing that I've noticed. I've seen actually a lot of that happen. One of the best examples, too, it's a beautiful story. The guy who actually created this machine. Because, see, again, when you see these machines, do you think people care much? Like whoever's working on these machines in China, they're just trying to slap things together. They don't care. People don't understand. It's like creating a samurai sword. You can look at two swords, you think they're both the same. They're not the same. Samurai swords are like next level. The Japanese, and I know from living here, the way that they look at details is unlike anything. They're almost like superhuman. Honestly, it's crazy. And so this guy wanted to make the best hydrogen machine in the world for home use. And why did he want to do that? Well, apparently his daughter, I learned a lot about his life. His daughter was born with Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS. And it's such a sad story because, they're telling this guy, look, you're lucky if your daughter makes it to 5 years old. And I don't know if any father can understand, but that is a sad. This is what I mean about these medical issues. They're so sad. They're so heartbreaking. And I know firsthand. And so it breaks my heart when I see companies selling garbage stuff. It just breaks my heart because people are looking for healing. They're not looking for garbage. And it's going to end up in a landfill or something. So anyway, this guy wanted to create the best machine in the world. Well, it's not easy to do that. He did a lot of research. He found every single modality of making hydrogen, like all the different ways. And then he looked at all the pluses and minuses of all of them. And of course, the best method happened to be the most difficult. And that's what he chose. He chose the most difficult method, hands down. And it was so difficult that literally it was impossible to build at the time. The technology didn't exist. And he had to go and get help from top engineers in Japan. And by the way, Japanese have unbelievable engineers. And he literally had to go to big time industries. I don't think people understand how big of a deal this is. He went to Toyota. They're big time. He went to G-Shock, the watch company? That was big time. He went to Yamaha. Yamaha's next level too. They do some crazy stuff. And then he went to he looked for it was a specific metal company. Because the science of metals, here's my big gripe on the stuff from China, and actually almost any device out there, they don't have the metal technology. You never want to use, for example, at least in my opinion, you never want to use stainless steel to make hydrogen. A lot of people are doing that. In my opinion, you never want to use plated or coated metal. The reason you don't want to use plated or coated metals, people don't understand that you're going to be running electricity through these metals and through the water. People don't understand. Think of something that's plated. What do you think is going to happen? Might this stuff just start flaking off? And if it's flaking off, is it getting in your water? Like, these are things to think about, And so this guy chose the hardest method, and he went to these companies asking for help. And I remember when I found out that when he went to the metal company, they said, what you're requesting is impossible. This is not even something that is even possible. And these guys are masterful with metal. Well, I believe it took something like a year or something, and they got back to him, and they're like, we made a breakthrough. We can make that metal that you want. And it was really unbelievable. So he created this little machine. He made it small. He made it affordable. Thank God it's not like $50,000 or $20,000. I've seen stuff like that. It's like $2,500 or whatever, and it's not something that you buy like every year or every month. This is something that he made it like a Toyota. It's super reliable. A lot of hydrogen machines have reliability issues. A lot of people don't know that. And so anyway, he really went through painstaking work to create this device. And so me personally, I've never met the guy, but like I have almost like a love for the heart that he put into this thing. I also found out that he had the chance to, build it in China and do a lot of stuff in regards to that machine in China. And he said, no, he said, I'm not going to do anything with this machine in China because I want it done right. He said, I don't want them to muck this up. This is too important to me. This is for my daughter. And so, he didn't look at the cost, like the penny pinchers or the bean counters, as they call them. Ultimately, he wanted to do it right. And then, ironically, that ended up shooting his company and the device that he basically had built to the number one machine in all of Japan. And that's a big deal. When something's the best in Japan, it's not easy to rise to the top in Japan. You really have to, like, by far be the best. And ever since then, he's improved upon that technology, and nobody even comes close. There's no hydrogen machines out there that come close. A lot of people like to claim there is, but I've never. I mean, I know all the devices out there, and they all use the same stuff. They're all using plated metal, stainless steel. Some of them even use lye, if you can believe that. You know what lye is?
Yeah, is that sodium? I was gonna say hydroxide, but I don't think.
Hydroxide,
Yeah, is it? Yeah.
which is literally the main ingredient in Drano.
Mm.
I mean, this is insane. I mean, at least in my opinion, it's insane. So people just don't understand hydrogen. They don't, and they don't understand the importance of making it. Ask any medical professional how important it is when you use oxygen therapy, like an oxygen tank in a hospital. The purity of what that oxygen needs to be. That's what they call it medical grade, and that's what medical grade means, of extremely high purity. Purity is of the utmost importance when you're dealing with gases, which is what we're talking about. Hydrogen gas, oxygen also, even things like ozone. There's cheap ozone machines, but when you want to do it right, you literally have to get a medical grade oxygen tank in order to make really high end good ozone for ozone therapy and stuff like that. So anyway, it just goes on and on. I could probably ramble on this forever.
Yeah, it's all good. And from my understanding, like the body naturally produces hydrogen as well. And obviously as we age, that decreases. What other things do you personally do, or have you seen work for people to like increase the amount of hydrogen you produce, like lifestyle factors and things?
What I do personally, just using hydrogen actually, in my opinion, really helps you also because you want the body running on all cylinders. So you want everything running correctly. That's one thing. One of the things that I personally do, the majority of your hydrogen is produced in your gut. So you want to keep your gut really healthy. And remember, we talked about like antibiotics being in water. This is, again, clean water is foundational. Start there. The other one that I'm really big on, and I know there's a lot of controversy about, again, diets, but this is what I'm really big on. And it was from a scientific study that I read, and even different protocols that I created, that there was no research, and now there is, and it turned out that I was right, which is fiber. Can't emphasize this enough. And I don't mean a fiber supplement. I know everybody always loves to run to the supplements. I try to go to the most natural thing possible, which is why I created these smoothies. The reason I created my smoothies was because the first study I saw actually was that the Japanese discovered something interesting. They discovered that if you eat vegetables first thing in the morning, which who does that, right? Almost nobody does that. But if you eat vegetables first thing in the morning, it appears to help regulate blood glucose all day long, which is really odd. Like, why would eating vegetables in the morning regulate my blood glucose? Of course, hydrogen appears to do that too. And regulating blood glucose is very important to your health. But anyway, so they discovered that. So when I read something like that, I'm like, how do I apply this to my life? And I'm like, how am I going to eat vegetables? So I'm like, I can make a smoothie. And I would just put all sorts of different vegetables that were also anti-parasitic, that had good nutrients. And then I would add very little fruit, but I would try to do really good fruit, like blueberries. There's a lot of good science on berries. And then I would put nuts and seeds for the fats, and again, the science that I would read about this stuff. So I was creating these smoothies because of the large amounts of fiber, but I was adding also minerals to it. Little did I know that in the future, they literally did a study on smoothies with adding minerals. It's almost like they watched my videos. And the results, you won't believe what happened. Fiber is so unbelievably important for so many functions in the body. And so, like, if I give you numerous examples, is one, nutrient absorption, because it helps. It's almost like a sponge that is time releasing little nutrients. It's really good for detoxing. really good for cleaning out, the GI system, keeping things clean, really good for feeding the good gut bacteria to produce good. When you have a healthy gut, the production of the hydrogen, exercise is also good for the production of hydrogen. So all those little things. And I just think getting a lot of the pesticides, out of our food, because we know how that affects, the microbiome. We also know how diet sodas affect the microbiome. I don't do any soda pop, though I'm really good at finding alternatives. So if you really want it, like let's say you want to enjoy a soda pop, okay, or you want to enjoy some delicious beverage. Here's one of the ones that I created. I have a bunch of them. So there's this really amazing product. I'm actually really impressed by it. It's by the same company, the Purium company. It's ishoppurium.com. That's what it is. And I do have a discount code if people want discounts. People love discounts. They can either use the code uprising144K. I think that one works. And there's this product called Apothecary. And it's just pure 100% cherries, that were, like a concentration of them. And I'll put the smallest amount in a cup, and then I'll just get like carbonated water, just carbonated water, and you just pour it in there and kind of mix it, and it just tastes really, really good. And it's, in my opinion, a much healthier way than the garbage sodas that are out there.
Mm. Yeah, for sure. There's always healthier alternatives, and yeah, exactly. You can't go wrong with cherry. Is it like tart cherry juice or something like that? Is it? Yeah,
Yeah.
I know the stuff.
And I've tried different ones, but I'm so impressed by the company. I didn't even do it on purpose, but I'm so big on purity, and just listen to these names. It's really wild. Like, okay, for example, the water filter that I recommend, which is a carbon distiller, their website is mypurewater.com. So I thought that's interesting. Okay, they put the word pure, and again, discount codes are always uprising144K. But so that's that one. And then the Purium company, the word pure is kind of in there. As far as for the hydrogen company, the company's called holyhydrogen.com, but holy means that which is pure. So it actually has to do with purity too. And then there's like these enzymes that have they come from Japan, but it's another company called Puridyme. So like everything really lined up around being pure. And I didn't even do that on purpose, but I found some really good companies, and they're very few. Like I said, there's just maybe 4 or 5 stuff that I personally use and share with my viewers.
Mm. Yeah, I've been curious about the digestive enzymes because I'm sure. Do you know Lou Corona? I'm sure you're aware of that.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
yeah.
I know he's a big proponent of them, and obviously he looks great for his age.
Mm-hmm.
Do you personally use like digestive enzymes like quite a bit? And yeah,
Not a lot. I used to. Interestingly enough, I mean, I love Lou, and but I did do his protocol when I was sick,
mm-hmm.
and I'm a little hesitant to say. I mean, was it good for my health? In my opinion, yes, but it didn't fix my problems. My problems were really severe, and it was really hard to do his protocol. There's so much juicing involved, massive amounts of produce, and I just didn't feel it was sustainable, and it was just too expensive for me. I know some people who can afford chefs and whatever, and that's all great. But the enzymes, I love the enzymes. They really help you, like as far as digestion and everything. But the thing that I noticed in time is when I started making these smoothies, that are full of fiber, natural enzymes within the food anyway, and then the hydrogen. Even hydrogen gets your body to produce, its own enzymes, and obviously the body does. But there's other ones that are greatly affected by quote unquote by hydrogen. And so do I use their enzymes? Yes, once in a while, but not like super heavily. I think I'm usually a big fan of taking enzymes if I were to eat something that's more difficult to digest. That's when I've really noticed it, because if food has enzymes in it, you typically don't have a problem. If you get food that doesn't have much enzymes, like a big steak with no fiber or whatever, it can be very helpful. In fact, the Japanese did a study on this too. They noticed a huge difference. Like, let's say you're gonna have a steak, right, or whatever. Eating vegetables first. So eating the vegetables first and getting your stomach all primed with the enzymes, the fibers, the antioxidants from the vegetables helps a great deal. Not just with digestion, but even other potential negative effects that come from eating certain foods. And I do the same thing with the hydrogen. I drink the hydrogen. Part of the protocol is also doing it on an empty stomach before meals. So it gets the body prepped and ready, for eating,
Mm.
Anyway, but Lou's a great guy. And yes, he's he's amazing. So, and yeah, I don't want to say, I don't want to say anything negative, but no, and his product is extremely good.
Yeah,
It's probably the best enzymes in all of the United States.
for sure. Yeah, you've just got to pick and choose what works for you, and everyone's unique. But yeah, exactly. If your condition was like really severe, sometimes you need like just a little bit more. I'm also curious because obviously you live in Japan. Like, are there any other things that you feel like Japan is ahead of the game on? Because obviously the East, they're very oftentimes like people say it's not like science backed, and then later on science will prove it, but they've known about it for generations. So is there anything like since living in Japan or researching it that you've noticed is like really good for health that they're ahead of the game on?
Tons of stuff. I mean, we would be here for quite a while. This is the reason that, again, like back to my protocols, this is the reason I wanted to create something really simple. Because if you do too many things, it's just too time consuming. But like, if I told you one of my favorite reasons and main reasons for coming to Japan, it's all about the water. The Japanese have an understanding about water that I don't think anybody in the world even comes close. And they have literally hot springs all over their country. And the history of them, because I was like, how did this happen? How do you have hot springs all over your country? And you should see the buildings that they build, the massive, the beauty in creating these things and digging for them and studying them and the effects on the body and all this stuff. It's like, who started this?
Yeah.
And then, of course, it's such an amazing story of a guy named Kukai. Kukai was like the Japanese Jesus, by the way. And this guy was real. And when I say he was real, I mean he's very well documented throughout their history. They know Kukai, and they know all the things that he did that basically made Japan what it is today. I mean, from not just the hot springs and different health things, but also if you've ever lived in Japan, the peacefulness of the people, like the low crime, just such a high standard. That's why, again, you got, not to pick on the Chinese really, because I got a ton of Chinese friends and I love them, but, when they create something, where is their moral compass? Because I've seen what they do to their food. I don't know if you have, but I mean, literally putting
Inject it.
plastic foods and making it look like rice so they can sell more. And it's about money. And they just don't have what the Japanese have. And honestly, I know Asia knows this. And when I say they know it, because I have Korean friends, I have Chinese friends, I got friends from Vietnam, I got Japanese friends. I know a lot of people in Asia. Everybody knows that the Japanese they're just different, and it's so impressive. And living here, the things that I've learned are just unbelievable. I mean, just normal little things too that they do in their life, but like natto's a big one. It's just a fermented bean, but the things that it does, the amount of research that they've done on natto is, I mean, it's a natural statin. I just rather eat the natto than take a pharmaceutical pill. Not to mention, I already mentioned the amount of protein it has. It also has a very special enzyme, which I couldn't talk about on my channel because of all the, we don't get free speech these days. But basically, it has this real special enzyme called nattokinase or nattokinase, really positive effects on the body. I mix a lot of my protocols. Like, for example, I put food in my smoothie that causes the body to produce nitric oxide. Not nitrous oxide, but nitric oxide, really open up the blood vessels. And I would literally put natto in my smoothie because then it thins the blood just a little bit, which is a good thing. And then I use the hydrogen, which opens those ghost vessels. And now the blood's a little thinner. And the hydrogen really moves that blood in a very different way, which is what the doctor thought was impossible and ended up proving that I was right. Not that I was right. The Japanese were right. They were the ones who really figured this out. And so combining these methods and again, the super absorption and proper hydration, I mean, the body can do amazing things. And then we get into wacky realms. I mean, I don't want to get too wacky, but I mean, this is a little wacky. We talked about it a little bit, like talking to water. It's like, come on. I thought this was a scam. For people who don't know me, I'm very skeptical. That's why I need data. I need to know that this is real before I'm going to jump all in. Yes, water appears to have memory, right? But the things that you can do with water, and one of the things that shocked me the most is how spiritual hydrogen is. And I don't think almost anybody knows this yet. And the only reason that I know is because there is a way, this is going to sound really weird, but there's a way to communicate like with water. And remember, your body's primarily made of water. And this is important because think about your emotional state and what that does to your body of water, like to your body. Your heart rate can go up, your blood pressure can go up. The Japanese have done research where they show that you literally produce these like crazy toxins in your body when you're overly stressed, very damaging to your body. And so water has this profound effect. Well, hydrogen is that which becomes water. And little that I know, I mean, I wish I had a chart to show you. People don't understand that, yes, hydrogen appears to affect the body in many positive ways, one of which appears to be as a selective antioxidant. Average person doesn't know. People hear the word antioxidant, it's just too vague because people don't realize that antioxidants actually come in different sizes. So if you were to look at the size of vitamin E or CoQ10, or glutathione, but hydrogen is like a tiny, it's smaller than a grain of sand. It's so tiny. And that's actually a really good thing because that means that it can literally access anywhere in your body. There's no place that it can't reach. It can reach your brain all the way down to your toes, your GI system. And obviously hydrogen, especially if it's made properly and super, super pure, appears to be extremely safe. I mean, it's literally less toxic than oxygen. Oxygen's way more toxic than hydrogen. That's why in deep sea diving, they use almost no oxygen. They actually shift to hydrogen and helium. And helium is just another form of hydrogen, by the way. And so the size of it is very important. One of the first studies was on how it was affecting the mitochondria. And this is so important because the mitochondria and its metabolism or how it affects your metabolism, I've seen a lot of people actually who are overweight use hydrogen and they start losing weight and they didn't even change anything else. They're just using hydrogen. And so I've seen that a lot too, actually, which is a little ironic. But the mitochondria, I mean, to get to the core and penetrate the mitochondria, you have to be really small. And hydrogen can do that. And not a lot of things can do that. And so that's another one of the unique aspects of hydrogen and all, the many things that it can do. It's fascinating. But on the spiritual front of it, I mean, I call it the ascension molecule because that's literally what it does. It ascends and it has so much power. A lot of times they call it active hydrogen because it's like so much energy, which is why they use it for negative things that explode and stuff like that. That's always sad. But you can literally, I also, to simplify it, like without going too crazy into the science of it, one of the other things is that hydrogen to me is like light. I mean, look at the sun, right? The sun is basically almost entirely hydrogen. And so when you're bringing this into your body, you're bringing in light in a very unique way. And one of the discoveries that I made so many with hydrogen, I started noticing that I wasn't burning in the sun. Like if I would spend too much time in the sun, especially when I haven't been in the sun for a very long time, I would burn if I'm out there for too long. And so do other people that I know. And I started noticing, like, I think it was my dad who kind of noticed it, and I was noticing it. And we're like, have you noticed that we're not burning? And we weren't using any sunscreen. And I started realizing that when I was using the hydrogen, it's allowing my body to absorb light from the sun in a very different way. There's no research on this yet, but I feel quite confident about it because we know how good sunlight is for our body anyway. But we also know that it can be damaging. And that's where hydrogen is so beautiful because the way that it appears to protect us is unbelievable. My video number 8 should show just a piece of that. But one of my other favorite examples, if you want to know how powerful hydrogen is, and there's so many things, but have you ever heard of a drug called cisplatin?
Is that the cancer drug?
Yep. And you know why doctors rarely use it?
Is it because it's like really harmful on the kidneys or liver or something?
It like destroys your kidneys. So here you're trying to treat cancer, and now you're going to need a kidney transplant, right? So they don't use it a lot. Well, they already did one study, I believe. I believe there might be more than one at this point, but I remember reading one where they used the hydrogen with the cisplatin just to see the difference. The kidneys were still functioning over 70%. I mean, that's impressive. And if hydrogen protects you from something that damaging, What do you think it's going to do when you're being exposed to radiation or 5G or sunlight or televisions or potential chemicals in your food? I mean, we are surrounded by this stuff. So that's why my protocol was I'm going to try to eliminate the pesticides. I'm going to clean my water to the highest degree. I'm going to do everything I can to take this burden off my body, because you know it burdens your body when you take in a chemical and your liver has to deal with it and your kidneys. And that leaves less energy to repair. So I did all that, but I also brought in the hydrogen, right? And protect me even more, or bring on the healing. And it was just a perfect recipe. I mean, the way that I did it, sometimes I don't know if I got lucky. Sometimes I honestly feel like I just had divine intervention. I feel ever since I made that prayer at my breaking point, I feel like I've been guided the whole time. And then I even started feeling like hydrogen can literally communicate with us. And I know that sounds really wacky, but when we found out that water has memory, just think about that, because water's been here before humans were ever here, and probably will be here when humans are gone. And it's not just the water. I think the hydrogen holds these memories, and I hesitate to talk about it because it sounds so wacky, and I'm such a data-driven guy. But this is very spiritual, and I even believe I've been getting, like, dare I say, like messages, like downloads from all this, even to the things that I don't even read about. Like, for example, Atlantis. I never really researched Atlantis, but now it's become quite clear to me that Atlantis had a knowledge about water and hydrogen that the world doesn't understand. They were masterful at understanding hydrogen and water. And if you want to know the truth, in my personal opinion, the Japanese are the modern day, or is the modern day Atlantis. People don't see the things that the Japanese are doing with water. They are the ones who discovered the whole thing about hydrogen, even ionization, like water ionizers or whatever. They created the Kangen, though they realized, I mean, the Kangen's good for some things. You don't want to drink the water, but it's really good at cleaning off like pesticides, off of water. It's really good at that. So that's one thing that it can do. Obviously, it doesn't allow you to inhale hydrogen gas. It really doesn't make the hydrogen properly, which means full saturation, pH neutral, all the things that hydrogen should do, in my personal opinion, based on all the data. And the Japanese know this too. I mean, Kangen's old news in Japan. It's still going on in America for some reason, but in Japan, it's old news. People don't use that thing anymore after they found out what it was, appears to be doing. So all I'm saying is, the Japanese are masterful at water, and then they have water, all these springs everywhere. That was the big reason, that I want to live in Japan, is access to those springs, because the health benefits are unbelievable also. And that's a beautiful thing that we get from nature. You can't mimic a hot spring. Only planet Earth can do something so beautiful. And that's why I also observe, just again, a lot of the things that planet Earth does, and then I try to find the science and line it all up. And good health is not that complicated, my friend. It's not that complicated.
Yeah, definitely.
You should see the way they treat their soil too. So, like, as far as farming, Japanese are master farmers. Unbelievable stuff. Like the stuff that I see when I go to the store. I don't know if you want to hear these stories, but like I'll go to the store and they literally will have all this produce, this like giant, area with all this produce, and they have pictures of the farmers. They grew the different produce, and they have this whole bio and the way they grow their food. And I'm like, this is crazy. Like, the Japanese love their farmers. They value their farmers on a level that I just think is so unbelievable and so beautiful. So much love. And then they'll have like a map, and it'll show exactly where the food was grown. And I didn't understand at first, like, why are they trying to show me where it was grown? And I started realizing by talking to a lot of Japanese that they're really into having local food. So they don't try to bring in food from all over the place. The farmers tend to bring the food that's local. That's why they show it on the map, because I kept thinking, well, this map is showing me that the farm is like right over here. But eventually I realized that, practically everything I was eating was local. And there's a lot of wisdom to that, by the way. Not to mention, I probably shouldn't bring this up, but hey, if you want, we're just chatting here. But this book blew me away too. I was very skeptical of it. It's called The Essene Gospel of Peace.
I've heard of it, but never read it.
I was skeptical, as usual. And the only reason that this book convinced me so much, and I actually took a lot of the healing methods from this book, and of course I lined them up with the science, and it all lined up. But the reason this was so impressive is because The way the hydrogen has affected me on a spiritual level, and I don't talk about it a lot, but I have gone to the other side. Yes, I also had, an the experience, the near death experiences. As you mentioned, I was attempting to end my life multiple times. And one time I really, I was technically, it's a miracle that I'm alive, according to the doctor. He's like, you should be dead. And it did do a lot of damage to my heart. That was the whole reason I had a heart condition, by the way. I wasn't born with that. I did that myself, sadly. But the hydrogen made it go away. My cardiologist was blown away by that. But when I went to the other side, the things that I personally saw, the things that I personally experienced, I never heard anybody say that. You always hear people about you go into the light or they see Jesus or different stuff, and I'm not attacking anybody's beliefs or religion. I'm just saying that's not what I saw. What I saw and I experienced was so different than anything I'd ever heard. Never heard a story like mine anywhere. And the reason this book blew me away, this is the whole reason I'm bringing it up. The last 3 pages in this book, a man by the name of Jesus, that's in this book, it's Jesus apparently, but stories you've never heard. This is supposed to be supposedly from the hidden archives of the Vatican. And that's why I just thought it was a bunch of BS. I'm like, come on, give me a break. But when I read those last 3 pages and this man named Jesus described everything that I saw, he described the other side perfectly. And when he did that, I was blown away. I couldn't believe that he was describing what I had experienced, and yet I've never heard anywhere. So that really blew my mind. And what blew my mind even more, I don't know if this didn't blow your mind, but it blew my mind. I was at a grocery store in Japan. It was a grocery store, but it was kind of slash mall. So they had some clothing, and they had a coffee shop, and they had a lot of groceries, local stuff. There was this giant, painting on the wall, some mural, or it was just a giant image on a wall. And I turned and I saw it. And the moment I saw it, I'm like, where did that come from? Because that image that they drew, I saw that when I was on the other side. And I'd never seen that anywhere. And I was thinking, who drew that? And where in the heck did they get an idea to draw that? I became very curious. And you know who created that image? It blew my mind. It was Kukai, the guy I was talking about earlier, this super brilliant Japanese Jesus guy. And so then I started looking up some of the images that he had drawn, and he called it like the Diamond Realm, this one particular place, because there's many places when you go to the other side. And another one he called the Womb Realm, which is the one that I saw. And the reason that it blew my mind so much was because when I went there, the beings that were on the other side took me back to when I was in my mother's womb. And it was so crazy, the things that they were showing me and the communication. But and a lot of this really is connected to hydrogen. Actually, it actually kind of has everything to do with hydrogen. And so this whole journey has just been wild. It's been a very strange one.
Mm. Yeah, it's amazing how these synchronicities all add up, especially once you have a certain level of consciousness, then you start spotting things that tally up. But yeah, I guess it's just something for everyone to experience in their own life. It's quite hard to probably put it into words, but yeah.
But it would be a long show, but what I can say, this is what I personally believe, and then ironically, I'll tell you what Jesus said in this book about it. What I went through, because there's a technique. There's actually a secret. I haven't really revealed it yet. There is a technique and certain secrets on how you can actually go to the other side without having to die, basically. And it's actually not like, oh, I'm special and I can go to the other side or I've done it. No. Everybody can do it. We're actually designed to be able to do it. We just don't know it. And that's what blew my mind too when I read this book, because that's what Jesus said in the book. He said, this is what we were made for. This is what we were destined for. And this is what, this is like a knowledge, an ancient knowledge and beauty that we've lost, And so I like very much that he said that, because it's not about just one person being special or somebody's above somebody else. That's really not what it's about. But there are certain things that become apparent when you travel over there. And some of them have a lot to do with your heart. Your heart actually is kind of everything when you go over there. And you're not allowed in certain areas unless they let you in and they literally check your heart. It's kind of crazy. Not like your physical heart, but, they don't allow certain things to enter certain areas. And that was kind of an interesting one, because it lines up a lot with Egyptian beliefs. If you've ever seen the one where you die and they weigh your heart with the feather to see if you're allowed in, it was a lot like that. Though there wasn't a feather, but there was a being. She was beautiful. Like when I say she was beautiful, she was like made of light, and the level of compassion and love emanating from her was unlike any human I've ever met. No human could hold a candle to this type of being, and it was really remarkable. And we had to have a rapport and spend time together before she let me in. She didn't just let me in, but she could see right through me. There was no hiding. When you're over there, there's no hiding, and so it was really wild. And you literally, by the way, you travel through hydrogen. You travel through the stars. So the stars are actually like doorways and portals for the soul and the spirit. And when you jump through them, because this is what I literally did, is you'd go in one and it would just shoot you to some star somewhere else, and then you jump in another one, and it was the way that you travel on the other side. And it was just unbelievable. I mean, this whole journey is, again, it's all been unbelievable. I only hope, I thank you for having me on, and I only hope that this will reach people who need the help. And I really hope that it can help change people's lives. And if it can't, that's literally the most important thing to me at this point, other than obviously my health and my happiness, because the healthier I am, the happier I am, the more I can share that with others. And that's what's important to me in my life at this point, because look, none of us live very long. Obviously, life is actually quite short. And so I think that it's important to, as even the scriptures say, love your neighbor, as yourself, love God, love even this body, this temple, treat it with respect. All this is very it's like karma, right? It's all comes around, goes around, as they say. And yeah, I hope that this information finds, at least, even if it just finds one person out there, it's worth it.
Mm. Sounds amazing. Yeah. If you've got time, would you like to finish on a few rapid fire questions?
Oh yeah, sure.
Awesome. Well, yeah. So the idea is just answer as quick as possible, but if you need to elaborate, feel free to elaborate.
Okay.
Okay. What's your favorite fruit?
Fruit. Oh, there's so many. No, okay. Favorite one. I mean, I like mango, pomegranates, Asian pears,
Nice.
fruit, apples, berries. I like a lot of them.
Describe yourself in one word.
Curious. Very loving too.
Nice. What is one book that everyone needs to read? You kind of alluded to that, but yeah, I guess.
Yeah, there's so many books that I've read, but I gotta say, these two are pretty awesome. I think these are must reads, depending on if you want to learn about water or just some wild Jesus stuff.
Hmm. So for anyone on audio, that's the Hidden Messages in Water and the Essene Gospel
Gospel
of Peace.
of Peace. Yeah.
What's the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
Wow. That one's gonna be hard to give me a second because I'm a
Yeah.
really deep thinker. I tend to, the best advice. Um, well, okay, this one didn't come from a human, but it came from somebody on the other side, and they said, you can only lead others as far as you yourself have gone. So basically, the advice was don't try to lead people to try to achieve or do things that you yourself haven't. So, you always do it first and figure out that you know how and that you can do it before you try to tell other people how to do it. That's why I think it's a funny example, but I know that like somebody goes to a trainer because they want to lose weight and get in shape, and yet the trainer's overweight. They're just like, what are we doing here? Does this guy even know what he's doing?
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answers your
Yeah,
question.
definitely. You've got to lead by example. What are three
Exactly.
things that you can't live without?
Oh, well, love has got to be up there. Health has got to be up there. And absolutely clean water and clean air.
Awesome.
Food.
What's your greatest strength and what's your biggest weakness?
Let's see. My greatest strength, I think, is how much I care and how much I love. And just, yeah, I've been told by my family sometimes, they're like, you care too much sometimes. I'm like, okay. That's probably my greatest strength, though. I think that might also be my greatest weakness. So sometimes it's like a double edged sword.
Yeah. Do you believe in having a purpose? If so, what's your purpose in life?
Absolutely. I think purpose is very important. I do think that you need to, everybody can do their own, but I've chosen to like the highest purpose that I can achieve. And then what was the second part to that question?
Yeah, like if you believe in having a purpose, what is your purpose?
Oh, my purpose, for me personally, um, I really just I want to get closer and closer to God, to be honest. I feel like there's secrets out there that we don't really totally understand. And sometimes God is not just a religion or something like he's so much bigger than that. And so there's a lot of things that I've done to try to self improve. I believe that the more self improvement that we do, the better we are to others and for others. If we're a mess, how are we going to help anybody else? So I believe in that a lot. A lot of self love that reflects to giving love, self improvement.
Definitely. And finally, what are you grateful for today?
I'm extremely grateful for my health. I mean, I'm grateful for my health so much, but I am also, it's kind of strange, but I am super grateful for that hydrogen machine that guy created because he changed my life. And one of these days, I'm going to have to go meet that guy. I got to shake that guy's hand or bow to him. I have to show him some respect someday when I get a chance to do that because I'd even like to meet his daughter. His daughter, who was supposed to be gone by the age of 5, is now like, I believe she's like 13 or 14 years old or something.
Wow.
And the hydrogen just really had a very positive effect on her and prolonged her life. And I would actually love to see that.
That's awesome. So yeah, thanks for your time. And where can the people find you? What have you got going on? All your links and yeah.
You know, if people want to help me or support me for free, they can and they want to learn more stuff. Go to YouTube. YouTube's a big one. My YouTube channel is called Uprising 144K. That's an ancient scriptural number. But they can also find me, and I highly encourage it to go to Twitter, otherwise known as X, go to Instagram, and then go to Rumble. Subscribe to all the platforms because my YouTube channel has been attacked a lot, as you can probably imagine. And so if that channel ever gets taken down, the only way you're going to find me is probably going on Twitter or X and find out the new name of whatever new channel that I create. And then, subscribing, sharing, and giving the videos thumbs up and all that really helps the algorithm and you getting the information out to other people who might be able to get benefit. And that's very supportive and doesn't cost you anything.
Awesome. Yeah. I appreciate your time and I appreciate everyone if you listened this far. Yeah, wishing everyone a wonderful rest of your day. Peace and love.